there, it seems like there's been agendas, but have we articulated an absolutamente negro, negre agenda? What would be on that agenda? Who are the people who should be around that table, and having a voice in that way? And so I think I'll open it up to the panel just to talk about what are the prescient issues that you see with regard to the threat to democracy, or what are the areas in which an agenda can be established or created around. And I'll pass it to Elizabeth.
Thank you. First, I'm honored to be at this table with these amazing people, all of whom have contributed so much to the way that we're living today. And I'm also really excited to be in the room with Dr. Marta Moreno Vega.
Exactly.
Who
in the back hiding.
Yeah, who I remember when my mom dropped me off, and all she said was, "This is someone you're going to learn so much from." And everything that I learned from her has really shaped and informed my journey to be part of the national leadership of the climate justice movement in the United States. So in terms of framing it, when we think about democracy and we're thinking about the rise of fascism and the threat, what is the threat right now? Literally, whatever you're studying, whatever you're doing, whatever your interest is, whatever your path is going, whatever your challenges are, whether it's houselessness, whether it's extreme policing, whether it's ICE raids, whatever that is going to be exacerbated by recurrent extreme weather events that have arrived. And so climate change, in my view, is the angry child of a legacy of extraction, of colonialism and enslavement. And it started a long time ago. And so we're seeing the impacts right now. And so what does governance look like, and what does democracy look like in the face of climate change is the question. How are we creating systems that are hyper-local, where we are accountable and we are engaging and addressing the 5 things that our people say they need, which is renewable energy with ownership at the heart, food sovereignty, drinkable water, it's actually 4 things, and wellness. I don't know what the 5th one is, but it'll come later, right? And how do we do that? And how do we do that in a way that moves us away from the system that got us here, which is capitalism? What does that look like? And, you know, we romanticize what organizing is, and then we don't really listen to the people in our communities. Mm-hmm. We come out with this elitist vision that was created in school, that was created in graduate school, that was created in law school, without really thinking about how our people are the holders of ancestral knowledge and brilliance, and how that culture is centered around collective care and not self-care. Self-care is deeply colonial, right? It's all about the self, like the United States. But collective care, what does that look like, and how do we amplify it, and how do we engage our communities in a just transition? So for me, that's the biggest threat. The fact that there's a rise in fascism, there's, the fact that the racism that we're hearing about is so bold and so out there, I actually enjoy it. I enjoy it because it tells us what's going on, what they're thinking, and they're doing the organizing for us, like they did with the comment about Puerto Rico 2 days ago. 2 days ago, they decided to insult Puerto Rico. What happens is that all of a sudden, then all of a sudden you've got, the indigenous people standing with us. Indigenous, I mean from Turtle Island. You've got Black people, African Americans standing with us. You got all the people from the Americas standing with us. And all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, we need to vote this person out. So they did the organizing for us. They really sort of helped us in so many ways because of their deep stupidity when it comes to being strategic, right? So that's, I won't take too long, and I'm happy to talk later on about what a just transition is and how that shows up locally and how that shows up across the country. What our relationships need to be with each other, because remember, to be American and to be part of this country means to believe in the American dream, and the American dream is an extractive dream that was built on the backs of our people and that pits us against each other. And that's a dream that is not sustainable. It is not sustainable because anything that is wedded to capitalism and to extraction is not sustainable in the face of climate change. So while our people are struggling on so many different levels, every single day, raising 2 or 3 children, holding 2 or 3 jobs, dealing with all the issues, they're also having to deal with the insecurity and the potential disruption of extreme weather events that are unpredictable. And so for me, preparing our people for that and recognizing that we actually do have the solutions is really at the heart of deep democracy and frontline-led solutions.
And that's why I wanted to ask you a similar question. What do you think? What are the issues that you think are in the forefront of the threats to democracy and points at which we can rally around a communal agenda?
Yeah, thank you so much. I was actually going to suggest for me to go last as the youngest person in the table. Out of wisdom, and usually in traditional wisdom tradition, the youngest person goes last. Hear the wisdom from the elders.
I heard it before.
Oh, gotcha.
There is so much that we are facing. I'm saying we. There is so much that we are facing that even answering a question that seems so direct would take cowardice. So just as Elizabeth has raised the basic issues that we're facing, I'm going to raise some of the obvious issues that we're facing. And I say that we're facing because I'd say this country has never had a democracy. It could want to be democracy or would be democracy. And all of the protest movements, all the civil rights movements, all of the just movements have edged it closer to being a democracy. And now, with the rise, I'm so happy to say it, the rise of, I should say, the return of the majority of this people on this country, in this country, being people of color, there is a tremendous, it's not a backlash. It's not a backlash. It's an affront to basically put us all in our place and deprive the whole entire country of any semblance of democracy, so that those who have been in control, the few wealthy who have been in control all along, remain in control. So they don't even want the guise of a democracy anymore. And you don't care to talk about it. They'll say, we don't want a democracy, we want a republic. And listen to the language. Mm-hmm. In a republic, you don't have people voting necessarily. People don't elect their representatives. And what is the major issue we're facing? What is our agenda? Well, the first agenda is we have to become informed. We are affronted every day. I mean, I'm on social media. One of my friends commented recently, why are you on social media so much recently? I said, I have to. I think it's my job to keep up with what people are saying. There is so much, it's not disinformation, it's misinformation. People deliberately telling you lies about what is going on in this country that we don't even know what's going on. Secondly, most people in this country, whether they are citizens, whether they are residents, whether they are students that came here to study, or whether they're just here, do not know how this government operates. Not really. They don't know how it operates. So they don't know what buttons to push. They don't know how to get things done in government. And that's if you even believe that the government is governing the government, the country. Well, let's go along with that thought, that the government is actually governing the country, okay? Let's go along with that myth. Because you can read any number of articles that tell you that who is really controlling the country are the ones who control the people who are elected by campaign contribution. So instead of answering to the people they represent, they answer to the people who fund their campaigns. The rich, the wealthy, sometimes they call them the corporations. But there are people behind the corporation. Somebody owns the corporation. So my major concern is we need to know how the system operates. But we also, even more fundamentally, I'm harking back to what what Elizabeth said, which I believe in extremely deeply. We need to organize our community. There shouldn't be a block where people in the block don't know who their block captain is, who can go and find out what's going on in their neighborhood. Find out what's going on with their school, find out what's going on with their subway stop. You know, we have to tune into somebody's radio station or go online and read what the MTA said so you can find out whether the subway's working. We can't ask our neighbor because they're going to look at us like we're crazy. I don't know. Have you checked it out online? We are completely dependent on what they tell us as opposed to what we know. As opposed to what we know. Now, I am one of the people up here that spent a tremendous amount of time, too much time, in state, city, and federal government. I've worked in all of those governments as a civil rights attorney. Why? So I can learn how they operate. That's the only way you really learn something, by actually going through it. So I went through it, I called it my apprenticeship. I went through it, I learned it, and then I got out and started working to do corrective actions for our folks. But I have found again and again that when I go to talk to people about an issue, I'll talk to them about the issue, whether it is climate justice or whatever, and they will ask a question that lets me know I have to go all the way back to basics because they don't understand the end run that I'm talking about. So I'm going to end there. I'll be back.
Same question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, like I said, in African wisdom traditions or indigenous wisdom traditions, usually the youngest person goes last, right? The wisdom comes before, so I wanted to honor that. And just sitting here with this wonderful leaders, I don't have much to add, but I will add some things. I think that there is importance when we're thinking about what are the threats to democracy. I think that James Baldwin says that America is built on a lie. The idea of this country is built on a lie. And what happens is that we believe the lie sometimes. The lie that the freedom is meant for all and that was what James Baldwin always called us to do. I'm going to call him this part. Is because he said we always have to keep America honest that lie is a lie until we make that reality come true. And we do that by believing certain ideas that you hear floated around this time. Your role doesn't really matter. It's not that important because actually you live in a blue state. Therefore, don't worry about it. Right? That's a lie because there are a lot of local decisions that are made by voting. As problematic as the voting apparatus can be, there are some important local decisions that actually really have direct impact on people's lives. And so that's one thing that is a threat to democracy. Another threat to democracy, and I think Dr. Elizabeth was getting to it, and you also mentioned it, was the idea of the way that we have become, our society, our culture is leaning very pro-capitalist and identifying more with the rich than with the poor. And that, I think, is a real big threat. It happens so much where we're like, with whatever, that in sports happens all the time. Well, that owner couldn't pay X amount to whatever the players are. We start to identify with the owner instead of the people who are playing in sports. This happens in so many other ways where this neo-capitalist, proto-capitalist agenda starts to really influence who we think we are and what we think we do. And so we believe in capitalist ideologies of like retail therapy and go do this and go do that, and all of that will make you feel well while we're participating in a system that is really draining us of our selfhood and of our personhood, and that is really extractive, right? I think that's the thing. I think there's a lot of individualistic thinking that the capitalist leads us to think. It's a mindset of less. It's a mindset of whatever I can get is mine, but it's not ours. Where I am reminded, and I was just reading a Spanish translation of Bell Hooks' Sister of the Yam. And Sisters of the Yam, she says, no one can liberate themselves on their own. It's a communal enterprise. And she says Black women have to free themselves together. And I would then expand it that all of us have to free ourselves together, right? Liberation, which sometimes freedom is also, I was going to mention, freedom is a word that has been kind of neutered. And like, oh, freedom, okay, it's individual freedom. Liberation as a commitment, right? As an ideology is much more communal, much more collective. And I think that the more that we start to remember that, the less that we allow the threat to really win out, right? Because it's a communal thing. We have to work together to liberate ourselves. Colonization was not an individual enterprise, it was a collective enterprise. So decolonization is a collective enterprise, and we have to do that for ourselves. And I think that those are really big issues. And then I think another one that we're losing, that we know and we notice it and we say it, and I know that everyone here at this table has understood it, is the way that anti-Blackness has become such a default mechanism and conversation in all of our spaces, in Latino spaces, in non-Latino spaces. There are certain anti-Black sentiments that become normalized in the way that we think and we treat people, we talk about people. Now, we may not know that we're saying something that's anti-Black or acting in an anti-Black way, but there are oftentimes ways in which the narrative of society has done that. The narrative of society has led us to this anti-Black idea, right, within the world, right? There's a myth, there's an ideology called Afro-pessimism. And Afro-pessimism just really says that the fact is the world has been built on this anti-Black kind of framework. And there's a lot of questions we can talk about what that means and all that and how that points toward Black liberation. But there is a way that the world operates like that, and it slowly seeps into ways in which we talk about people and conversations in society and what jokes we laugh at and what things we look at and how we treat certain artistic styles. So I just think we have to become more aware. This is something that you were saying, Dr. Esmeralda, that there is a critical thinking that we must do on our own. We have to become less reliant on, I'm not anti-technology at all, but I'm just saying the quick answer from Google to being the veracity of what we're saying instead of looking things up. Google's not going to quote you Kwame Ture. It's not going to quote you certain things because those things are not part of the algorithm that are going to let you learn what liberation really means. So you have to do that on your own. We have to do that on our own. And that lack of critical thinking then leads to believing whatever the system, whatever they want us to believe, right? And to quote Kendrick, they not like us. The they is the people who are in power, the people who want you to believe certain truths and certain random things, right? And that has to come with critical thinking and critical engagement, right? Relearning some things directly from the minds of Black wisdom, indigenous wisdom, that is not centered in our society. Black wisdom is not centered. Indigenous wisdom is not centered. And so we then have to do that centering for ourselves. How do we center Black wisdom? How do we center that? Because that will then lead us closer to liberation than if we're just, let me just Google quickly what whatever means. Oh, this is what Google now tells me that it means, so therefore now I know what it means. No, there's a deeper learning that has to happen. And I think with that, I think that's a big threat to democracy, because I think the less that we engage in critical thinking for ourselves and critical questioning, even questioning people who look like us, right? Even questioning, because a lot of neo-capitalist agenda has been done by people who look like us, right? Even questioning that comes with critical thinking, when you're able to be like, okay, that person sounds like they're saying something good, but at the root of that, what is that? At the root of that, what is this, right? I'm reminded of, for example, and I'm sorry I've gone too long and I'll pass it back, but I'm reminded, for example, when Bell Hooks criticized Beyonce's Lemonade. Bell Hooks criticized Lemonade. Now, many people love Lemonade. Lemonade is great. So, when she was like, is it really a really intelligent, feminist, Black feminist view of the world? She was like, no. And you can read Bell Hooks, and then people, because they didn't know who Bell Hooks was, criticized her, called her anti-Black. I'm like, you don't know who Bell Hooks is for you to call someone like that anti-Black. But what I'm saying is that she was engaging in this process of being critical even towards those people that we may have glorified and lifted up as our icons of freedom, because she's like, we need to even hold those people accountable. And I think that comes from a reflective engagement with Black liberation, with womanist and mujerista and Black feminist thinking that allows us to really question what is at stake there. And so I just think that the more that we engage in critical thinking and critical conversation, even of those people that we think are the signifiers of our freedom, let's say, I think really gets us closer to making sure that we keep democracy alive in the way that we want it. Because I think you said everyone pointed to the idea of democracy. It's also a questionable idea in this country, and I would say in certain parts of the world, right? Here we know not everyone had access to democracy, and even technically now, right? The majority vote doesn't always win out in certain things. That happens in so many other countries in the world. So I think, but critical thinking starts to allow us to engage. Okay, how can we make sure that we're not listening to the lies, that your vote doesn't matter for any decision, that your things don't matter for this, that just read this one thing, this is the truth. We have to start to engage that in a critical process, and I think that's one of the ways to do it.
Thank you very much. So I think some of what we've heard is that there's information and a basic amount of information that people have to have, even in order to have critical thinking, right? So we talked about how there is an idea of democracy, but that the practice of democracy in this country is something very different, that there's structurally in this country, it is built to be, in some degree, anti-democratic. And what I mean by that is that Josue just talked about that there is a possibility, and it has happened twice now, at least, where the popular vote went to one candidate, but the other candidate who didn't win the popular vote won the election. And this is the presidential election. And so how does that happen? It happens because there's an electoral college. Why is there an electoral college? For the same reasons that there's a Senate, right? Why are there 2 senators for the state of Wyoming and 2 senators for the state of New York, even though the population of the state of Wyoming isn't even the size of one of our smaller cities in New York State, right? But they have the same amount of power to thwart the democratic system. And these are not mistakes. These are built into the fabric of this country, built into the Constitution, built into the processes of this country. And so you have to understand, as Esmeralda was saying, how it works in order to be able to push the right levers, in order to be able to assert power in the right places to effectuate the change that we want to see. So one thing we were talking about is becoming informed and understanding civically how the country works. And I think another conversation is about the corrupting effect, if you can call it that, of capitalism and how it affects not just the politics of this country, but information and the ability for us to know what is actually going on, and that infection and what we can do about that. And I think the third thing that was really elevated in the last part of this conversation was critical thinking and a new kind of consciousness, a kind of consciousness that's not really new, because our people have been about la práctica de liberation since we've been here, right? This is not a new ideology or a new thought process, but it's about how do we take what has been given to us. I think Elizabeth was talking about that with the ancestors and with what has been done before, and how do we begin to bridge that chasm of where we are to where we'd like to be. And so I think the next part of our conversation, I'd like to talk about what are some of the things that are being done, what are some of the models that are out there, what are some of the ways in which we are continuing to resist, continuing to reinvent, reimagine, reestablish ourselves in la práctica de liberation. And I'd like to toss it back to Elizabeth on that question.
Thank you. That's a great question. And before I answer that question, I do have to say something about Beyonce and lemonade. I want to say that before she was thinking about lemonade, she bought in Ibeyi, literally appropriated Ibeyi's risk. Ibeyi disappeared, and then all of a sudden we had lemonade. That's how capitalism works, and that's how we turn it on each other. Literally started lifting sisters and making them. Do you know what Ibeyi is? Is this all Generation Z?
It's mixed.
Wow. Okay. Well, that you can Google.
Yeah. Y'all know who
Okay, that you can Google. So it's a pair of twins that come from Afro-Latino roots, who come from an Orisha family, who sang, who were rising, and it was a vibe that she wanted. And she took the vibe and left them, and they kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. So I just want to share that. Because, I don't know bell hooks, but I know Ibeyi, and I was pissed. Right. So how do we move from where we are to where we need to go? And what does that look like? It looks like a just transition. And in the climate justice movement, we say that transition is inevitable, but justice is not. And so what is happening in our communities, and I can tell you from Puerto Rico all the way to Guam, what we are doing in our communities, right? We are fighting the bad, building the new, moving the money, and changing the rules. That's what we're doing. And so what does that look like in Sunset Park? In Sunset Park, Brooklyn, where I live, we are in a significant maritime industrial area. That means that the industrial sector has played a role, not just in Sunset, but throughout the United States and Puerto Rico, of engaging in building infrastructure that has been toxic and has exposed us to toxicity for generations and generations. If you look in the South, you'll know that where the communities first became freed from enslavement, that they're surrounded by petrochemical industries, and that they even have dioxin in their bloodstream. If you go to the West Coast, you see that they're on fire. If you go to Puerto Rico, there are 23 superfunds, which means that it's a brownfield that is super toxic, and if there's an extreme weather event like Hurricane Maria, I'm breaking it down. She's my elder, so I gotta listen. But a brownfield is land that is either contaminated or perceived as contaminated. So when these people are talking about Puerto Rico being polluted, it is. It's been polluted by U.S. corporations since our people were extracted and pushed out of Puerto Rico to make room for the petrochemical industries back in the day. And so all of that toxicity goes into the groundwater, into the air, into the buildings, into our lungs, into our system. And so you've got Puerto Ricans leading in the world on levels of asthma, right? It's important for you when the brother's talking about critical thinking for you to break things down so that you can digest it. We're sick. The food is killing us. And we're not thinking about the food industrial complex, how that ended up, who's growing the food, and how that ends up in our system and how it's contaminating us, right? Because they basically made Black farmers not want to do Black farming because they shamed them because that's what they were doing when they were in the slave quarters, right? So now Black farmers have to reclaim the land. And then indigenous people need to decolonize the soil because the soil has been contaminated for so many generations that it no longer has the nutrients to produce food that will sustain us. It really is part of a life cycle. It really is part of a just transition. And so in some communities like ours, we're looking at the industrial sector that has been polluting and killing us for generations. And all of those health disparities live in our bodies, and certainly live in mine. And moving away and demanding that that sector is building for climate adaptation, mitigation, and resilience, that they're bringing in green manufacturing, that we're looking at things like fast fashion, the things that you see when you hit TikTok, right? That fast fashion not only pollutes and creates tremendous amounts of waste, but mistreats its workers. And then the contaminants are literally on the fabric. And then our women, because our women want to look nice because we have a long history of adorning, so don't judge us because that's who we've always been, right? Can only afford fast fashion. And so they're buying clothes that are literally causing cancer. And they know that that's the target audience. So what that means is every single industry can be deconstructed and then an alternative. And remember, the alternative is important. It's not enough to whine and complain. It's not enough to talk about the fact that they have been oppressing us. We know that. We know that by 2042, we're the majority in this country and they're freaking out, right? It is important to figure out how to undo it, how to disrupt it, how to create alternative systems that we operationalize at a hyper local level and that we are committed to build across other movement spaces. That we don't have to do everything and know everything, but we have to know everybody. And we need to be able to be working in a way that is not competitive, and you're all being trained to be competitive. You're all being trained to be Western. When I talk about reclaiming our ancestral traditions, it's about being in deep collaboration with each other, building solidarity with each other, and all working towards our strengths. So our organization is intergenerational. It is matriarchal, it is leaderful, and so we don't have to know everything. So we identify people in the community that are experts, and then we incubate it, provide them with resources so that they can lift up that work that is so necessary to the community, and we don't have to do that. But if we can work in a way that is basically moving the money so that the front line, the people most impacted by climate change who were not responsible for it, have the resources, we can operationalize a just transition. And so from drinkable water, so you've got people in Indian country living downwind from radioactive waste, and people buying up those properties. You've got in West Virginia, mountaintop removal, but you've got the unions that, oh my God, everybody loves the unions without asking how are the unions getting in the way? Well, the unions are capitalists, they are patriarchal, they do not really care about their rank and file, and so they are cutting deals with fossil fuel companies that literally put the people who are their rank and file, they'll say, okay, you can put food on the table, but you're not gonna be able to breathe. Right? So if you're in West Virginia and you're in Appalachia, what that means is that, well, you're in cold country. And so what does a just transition looks like? It looks like community-owned solar. It looks like offshore wind and making sure that the supply chain is coming from our people and that they're hiring people that are coming out of the prison system, that they're hiring women, that they're hiring undocumented people, that they're hiring historically marginalized communities. Those are all examples of a just transition, and you should know, because I don't want you to get lost in your head and think that this is all theory, that this is not just aspirational, this is operational. The money that you've been reading about, the IRA funding, that amount of money that includes false solutions like green hydrogen and carbon sequestration and geoengineering and all that stuff, that's all created by the fossil fuel companies to make you think that they're doing right by us in terms of the environment, but it is literally turning our communities into sacrifice zones. So what is that? That is organizing, that is base building, that is popular education, that is science, that is social studies. That's all the things you're supposed to be learning in the classroom, and that's happening in a movement space. And we share that information because we do not believe in the traditional iconic leader where that one person speaks for the movement. We share, we step in, we step out, we do that dance, right? And then the other thing is that we use celebrity in a very different way than the ways that you've been conditioned to. You've been conditioned to get on social media and you're addicted to those likes and you're on it 24/7. A celebrity in a movement space is to use a platform of people that we don't have access to amplify the local narrative in a way that honors the front line of the climate justice movement, the people in our community, Doña Juana, and people in our neighborhood who don't know why they're sick all the time and why everything hurts. We are living in the age of climate change. And if you're not thinking about it and you're not engaging with an organization that is about that, then I don't know what you're doing. And I want to just say something really quick about groups that are talking about youth-led and Sunrise and Fridays for the Future and all these groups that are popping up every 5 minutes. Okay? Sorry. You see what's happening? The ancestors are like, what? So mira, all these groups. It's important that you know because they're going to recruit you. They're going to recruit you because you're a person of color, you're a black and brown person, and they need a poster child for an agenda that you didn't create. And they're going to put you in front of the TV and you're going to be addicted to it and think that you're the shit because you were just on television. And so you need to ask why. And you need to understand who has led movements in this country. Mm-hmm. Who has led movements? Mm-hmm. Well, civil rights movement was led by black youth. Black Panthers, black youth. The Young Lords, Puerto Rican youth. Brown Berets, Chicano youth. American Indian movement. The civil rights movement, Black Lives Matter, Standing Rock. Every freaking movement that we have had that has benefited, that has made it possible for us to be here at this table was led by our young people who people have deficit-based expectations of. And people think of them as at risk. We know they're at potential because we be with them once, right? And we know that our young people are brilliant. But the idea of youth-led is this Anglo-American concept that pits generations against each other, is extractive, competitive, and capitalist at its heart. And so the idea of building intergenerational power is grounded in our traditions and our history and makes it possible for young people to step into leadership while knowing how to read the political room because we taught them that. And so in our culture, we don't send somebody to a nursing home. We take care of our elders. And in our culture, we respect and honor our elders because we know they went through things that we can only read about. So the idea of youth-led is counter to the way we think about how you build power. It is intergenerational leadership. It is a continuum of power where young people and people who are older are learning from each other across the table. We are better and stronger because young people are there and they have a particular perspective and understanding about power that we don't. And they've had experiences that we have not, and so have we. And that's where the power lies in that relationship with each other. So why am I sharing all of this? Because you might not hear it from anybody else. And I want you to know that there are places that you can pick up that language. None of the ideas that I have and none of the things that I do come from me being the smartest kid in the room. It comes from being in a place where we're all the smartest kids in the room. And we share that information with each other, the strategy, the economics. It is highly complex. It is multidimensional. So we are passing legislation. We're putting infrastructure on the ground. All that money that I talked about that was part of the IRA was supposed to go straight to the front line, to the people most impacted. But there are white-led organizations popping up all over the place, taking advantage of the funding that was meant for us so that we could put the infrastructure on the ground so that you could have access to those just transition jobs, because we're not going to call them green jobs, because green jobs is just the regular economy with the green patina on it. So all of that requires that you identify, instead of thinking, oh, I want to lead, I want to be a celebrity, identify the organizations in your community that are doing the work and say, how can I serve? How can I help? How can I amplify? How do we build with each other? Instead of, let me pick your brain. Do you know how many students call me to pick my brain? And I'm like, I am not getting my brain picked today. I even have a video on the website to graduate students about, don't call me. Don't call me, because if you decided to do a master's about issues that impact my community and you didn't ask, how can I develop that master's? Because you're not going to be guided by your professors this way. And you didn't ask, listen, I have an opportunity to develop a paper. What do I need that's going to add value and help move the agenda? What is it that is needed locally? And then we'll say, hey, come in, because we need you. And we need you to, because you have access to universities, you have access to policy, you have access to research, to data collection. We need you. That's a different conversation. And then in being critical, think about data and the data. Like, we are called minorities, we're not, we're the global majority. We're called Hispanics. What is that exactly? I have no clue, right? And that term, and think about how language was created to maintain the status quo. So all of a sudden, you've got all these Spaniards who were responsible for colonialism and enslavement, also benefiting from our struggle here because of the term Hispanic, right? It diminishes who we are. It erases our blackness and our indigeneity. It is not our language. But if you're European, you could be French, you could be Italian, you could be German, you could be all the things. But if it's us, then we're Hispanic, and we'll put it in a category, and data's collected that way, and then they determine how resources are allocated to our community based on that data. If you're Asian, the same thing. A South Asian is not the same thing as an East Asian, and there are differences, tons of differences there. So the language is meant to control us. And so I want you to dismantle the language and create language. You're the ones who decided, no, you're going to call me they. You decided that. And out of respect, without knowing the language, right? Because I come from a different generation. You tell me to call you they, I'm going to call you they. That's what I'm going to do, because I'm anchored in justice. So you are creating language. You are creating concepts. You are creating models. And we're here for that. But I want you to really think, what's on your table? What is being presented to you in the classroom? And how do you use it to advance, creating a different society that is built on just transitions and just relationships with each other? What is that process of self-transformation that you are engaging in? Because all of us are victims of an education that determined how we were going to show up in this space. So it's a lot of work. I believe you can do it. I think you're a bunch of smart asses. Honestly, we're all smart. We know this. Isn't that one of the reasons why people try to control us, right? They hire community affairs people, these corporations that look like us, so they can come and manage us. That's what they do. They put our people in the place of managing us. And some of them are so deeply colonized, bendito, you just gotta white light them. And then others are understanding that they're inside trying to make sure they're moving resources out to our people. be in that space. That is a beautiful space. It kind of looks like Matrix Revolution, the second episode with the party scene. That's who you all to me, all right? So be in that space and understand that we are here not only to provide you with information, but to provide you with a guide, a path to how you come into this work. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're not doing work on climate justice, I don't know, man, because we are having tornadoes in Brooklyn on a regular basis. Tornadoes in Brooklyn is not normal. So that's why I'll stop. It's a lot, but what we're doing is a lot. And we are operationalizing a just transition. It's happening in Detroit. It's happening in the Gulf South. It is happening in spite of governance. We're demanding co-governance. That's talk for another day. We're doing it with or without the money because our people have always done that. And with the money is clearly better. And we'll take it. We'll take it because it's owed to us, right? So that's your charge. That's your charge of how you come into the work. And I don't want you to get lost in your heads. I want you to feel it, and I want you to know that it's operational. In Puerto Rico, it was the front line, the grassroots people who started engaging in food sovereignty and renewable energy with leadership, with ownership at it. And so what happens in Puerto Rico? All of a sudden, the Hispanic Foundation comes in, and they come in with people like Nestle. What does Nestle want to do? They want to privatize water. Right? And then they start using our language of a just transition and grassroots organizing and hiring people on the ground to create a mess and to basically suffocate what is the growing move for independence in Puerto Rico. So be aware of that, and know that there's people, that there's a lot of us, we're all over the place. We look like everybody in this room, and we're here to guide you, to invite you in so that we change everything, because this right now, this moment, this is the moment to do it. This is the moment to change everything.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. So that's amazing, Elizabeth. And we obviously there's no lack of creativity, resourcefulness, and people who are doing this work. It is operational. It is just. It's happening. It doesn't get highlighted. It doesn't. It's not on the front pages, but it is definitely everywhere. Everywhere, people are hyper-local, hyper-engaged, self-governing to the degree that they have to because the systems have otherwise failed them. So, but I did want to bring this discussion back to, we talked about bridging a chasm, but we are where we are today, right? We're on the eve of a very consequential election. We understand that there are structural issues with the democracy that we've talked about previously. There are operational issues with this democracy. There is voter suppression, which is humongous, gerrymandering, which is why we have a House of Representatives that's ruled by the minority of the voters in this country. So we have voter suppression, we have gerrymandering, we have dark money, contributions, so many things at play here. So I just want to know from Esmeralda, what is the play here? What is the práctica here of liberation in this space? How do we impact the powers that be, considering the fact that we have all these headwinds that were either built into the system or maintained by the system? What is the importance of civic engagement, of activism, and where in that scheme are we to act in this moment?
Well, first of all, thank you, Elizabeth, and it is multidimensional. Don't think that you do one thing and you're done. We have to think about this sort of like an onion. There's the outer skin, I'll call that voting. It's a thing you do, you go, you know that it will not have the impact you want it to have. But you also know that you can actually affect some local elected officials. Stop thinking about the presidency. So I'm thinking about assembly, state senate, These are people that live in your community that's supposed to be representing you. You can have much more impact on them than you can on the president. But our people, because this is a hierarchical society, think that, oh, the presidential election, I must vote. Let's start thinking about presidents as symbols and local elected officials, which are state assembly, state senate, city council. They're not running this year, that's next year, when they elect a new mayor. No comment. No comment. Won't be talking about that all afternoon. See me afternoon, all right? So the real deal is the onion. You go, you vote. I voted yesterday. There was a line for early voting. That's a warning for you folks. Get there soon, unless you want to spend an hour waiting to vote. And there's 3 pages of ballot. It wasn't just turn it over, and then there's the next page, okay? So, at least in my district, there were 3 pages of ballot. So, be prepared, read the literature that they sent you. It was sent by the government, so it sort of just lays out what it is. And start looking up what you think you have to look up. And yes, there are referendums there, 6 referendums. See me later if you want to talk about that. But you do the voting thing. That's the skin. How many of you eat onion skin? I don't think so. So that means you gotta go deep. What's the next layer of involvement? It's already been spoken about. We're gonna say it over and over again. Whatever your interest is in your community, I don't care what it is, youth work, senior work, food security, housing security, youth activism, I don't know what that means, but, some people say they have youth groups, all right? Whether it's the arts, whatever it is, tutoring students. Don't think because you're a student and you have a job or you have a family, therefore my state's full. No. You are not full until you start engaging yourself with the community group. It's not about your individual family. We sink or swim together. There is no liberation individually. It doesn't happen. And if you think that if you have enough money, you're free, start looking around at what happens to people who get a lot of money. They're not free. Most of them are even more imprisoned in their own mind and in their own habits than the rest of us. Please. The second thing I'm going to say is a little controversial. You have to evaluate what you have been taught by family, friends, your church, or whatever, and decide what you believe, what is just, and what is real for you. That takes courage. Because, that takes courage. Because, therefore, you may be going against some of the family habits. It's actually conditioning. Things that we were taught to do. Things that, for example, I'll use myself. I didn't just go to Catholic grammar school, I went to Catholic high school. By the time I was in the 10th grade, I really wasn't a Catholic. I didn't believe it. So I told them, they kicked me out of religion class, and made me go to religion with a priest. He said I was fine. You believe in doing the right thing, don't worry about it. Don't worry about all this dogma. Believe what, and if you're searching, start searching. Start reading. I'd already been reading. My family knew I was a rebel, so my mother who was a Catholic, said that's all right. It was funny. That's right. She goes to mass more than the rest of us. Because I like devotional. But just do what you do. But my grandmother was highly upset. My grandmother never went to church. Highly upset. Breaking in cultural tradition. We're Catholics. I said, look, and I was a smart ass, I'll just say it out there. I said we weren't always Catholic. When your grandmother came over here, she was the first one in this country. When your grandmother came to the island where my family settled in St. Croix, She was not Catholic. She wasn't Catholic. And when her grandmother came to Barbados, she wasn't Catholic. That's something that was imposed upon her. And anyway, when you take me to the local priest to get a reading, that's not Catholic. So I don't really think we're Catholic. We do what we do. But the courage to do it, it takes courage. That's critical thinking. What do you really believe in? What are you willing to live for? What do you think you need to do just to survive and to then thrive? And not just you, the community. You're not going anywhere by yourself. Even if they tell you it's an individual thing, bootstraps, all the rest of that, believe me. And I know they say, all you gotta do is be a celebrity. No. No. The goal is not to be a celebrity. The goal is to be a human being with self-determination. And if nobody ever told you that, you better write that down. To be a human being with self-determination, which means you can decide what you want to do for yourself and your community and decide who you belong to. And next layer, you don't just get involved in the local community organization, you bring other people in. It's not enough for you to say, I'm doing this good stuff. And your brothers, your sisters, your friends, they're off, playing video games and they think that's all it's about. Well, I'm not kidding. I have a grandson, all right? I'm concerned. He's addicted to video games. He thinks all he has to do is sit in his room and play video games. You've got to break them out of that spell and get them involved in real activity, real human activity, not some thing that's on a screen, some fake reality. Some of us would rather be on a screen than in our own world. Next thing you gotta do, it's going another layer down. You have to have these discussions with your friends and your family. You have to talk to them about what you believe, and not just what you believe, why you believe it, why you think that it's community activism and involvement is so important, why you believe that we have to have a just society, why you believe that we are not destined to be slaves. The thing about this country is they don't call us slaves. Go to some other parts of the world, they just call you a slave. People that work in the corporation, you're just a slave. They call you what you are. In this country, they make it fancy, You're a manager. You're this, you're that. No, we work for that. We work for that. I'm not saying that you have to quit your job, but I am saying eventually you may have to quit your job. Because it will be inconsistent with your beliefs and your principles. If you have to do that. And if you don't have to, if you need that job, you do the job and you work still community. And the last thing, the absolutely last thing you have to do is you have to continually question yourself. It's not a one-time thing. You don't do it once. You don't wake up tomorrow, okay, I'm gonna do this self-examination. I'm gonna do this critical thing. What do I have to do? Oh, I'm joining this organization. I'm now working to get green energy. We're gonna work on this together. You're gonna have to figure out how to make it real in your lives. Elizabeth gave you so much in terms of what's really happening in other parts of the world and in our own community, what people are doing to self-determine. Think about what you would do if there was no grid. If you were off-grid, how would you live? Are you with me? Off-grid? Off-grid? No electricity. All right. No water. This is real, folks. And climate change is going to make it real for all of us. I read somewhere, that we should only drink bottled water now. That the water's contaminated. I'm not saying that's true. But I'm hearing it over and over and over. That even the tap water is no good. So I don't have a well, I don't know about you. But I'm getting concerned. So if you're getting concerned about how you're going to live, don't just get concerned. Get active. Figure out with other people how you can have clean water. They haven't figured it out in Flint yet. They have not figured it. They're still on bottled water there. They haven't figured it out yet. And Flint is an example. They just found out that they were being poisoned. But all the rest of them, what do we know? So I'm that's without the core of the onion. When you get to the core, take the onion and plant it in the ground. In other words, it has to multiply and spread. And understand that this is not a job. This is your life's work. This is why you're on the planet now. You have a reason for being here at this time and place. And boy, are we in trouble as human beings. Capitalism has destroyed the planet. And the planet is taking it out on humans. If the humans are the problem, what would you do? The planet's bigger than all of us. If you had a mosquito that was constantly irritating you, what would you do? You'd slap the mosquito, kill it, right? Well, guess what? I think the planet's giving us a little bit taste of what is going to happen if we don't stop polluting, if we don't stop poisoning. And we will all suffer from the sins of others. We didn't make gazillions off of poisoning the air, the water, and the sea. But we will be, our people are the ones that are suffering mightily. You have a lot of work to do. There are those of us sitting up here, we've already done this. We've done it, and then guess what? We're alive, we're well, we're happy. Happy. We are at peace with ourselves. We've done this our entire lives. And I was a CUNY student just like you. I was a CUNY student just like you. And I made that decision when I was in CUNY that I was going to take control as much as I can of my life with other people who believe and were willing to work for it. One last thing about this whole election stuff. I specialize in voting rights. I want you to know that in every single state, including New York State, there is not a year that goes by where they're not trying to make it harder and more difficult for people to vote. Why? Because the less people that vote of us, the more likely they are to win. And since they have the money, they're using the money against us. It's very real. It's in every single state. If you go and you look up voting rights restriction, you'll see article after article about what they're trying to do in Virginia and Georgia. Georgia's a good example. How about this? I'm going to stop there. After Obama, when he was in office, got this law passed, because he can't pass anything, Congress passed the law, got this law passed that made sure that everybody would be able to vote on an electronic machine, okay? It was required. You know what they passed in Georgia last year? A court just nullified it, thank God. That notwithstanding electronic voting, they wanted every vote to be counted by hand. After the election. You realize how long that would take? You go to the machine, you look at the runs, you count, okay, this person voted here. You don't know whether they voted for, but this person voted, this person voted. That will take months. How do you slow down a presidential election? You make it so slow that they can't even figure out who won in the state by putting something like that in. Another law that they tried to do was make it illegal to give people water if they're standing in line. It's just craziness. A whole movement grew up in Georgia. This is Georgia too. Water for voting. When my god sister read that. I'm telling you, there is a place for you in self-determination leading to liberation, and it starts with activism and civic engagement. There is no other way. If it's not us, who's going to do it?
Thank you, Esmeralda.
We've lost the power on this microphone, but I hope that you can all hear. It's a really powerful panel. I don't want to end it without hearing from the wisdom of youth in the middle there, Josue. We had a lot of conversation about what needs to be done, what can be done, but really a common theme throughout has been about consciousness, about values, the porqué of all of this. And if you can speak a little bit, Josue, about those things and the groundedness of this work. Oh,
Yeah, and I'll give a short answer, and then we want to open it to your thoughts and questions and comments. I think that the why, and I'm raising because I'm trying to make sure that you'll see here. I think that the reason why we need to do this is because it's really for our community survival. It's for our own personal survival. And I think that, when we hear these things, sometimes it can be natural to feel fear, right? Oh my God, so many things are happening. Oh my God. But I was just on the subway ride over here, I was reading a poet. Says, fear sometimes is the way that leads us to love, right? And that sometimes that with which we're afraid can lead us to action and then move us closer to love. And I think that one of the things that is important for me, and I know I said this, thank you. Thank you so much. Huh?
What's the poet?
That was Hanif Abdul-Rakim, who wrote a book. The book is called On Basketball and Ascension. But it's a beautiful poetic book on how he sees his blackness being elevated through him playing basketball and through other things. It's a really wonderful poet. It was beautiful. And the only reason why I say that is because I do think that it's important for our survival. I think that what grounds this is ensuring that we are always moving towards a way to center the voices or center the wisdom that is not centered, so that we can then learn for ourselves, survive for ourselves, have thriving and success and exciting lives and lives full of love, and that leads us then to create a more loving and just society. Mm-hmm. James Baldwin, I quote James Baldwin because I read James Baldwin all the time. He says that he believes that the entire world is really held together by people who choose to love in this way, to love one another. And I think that that's really why we do it, right? We fight against supremacy, we fight against movements of oppression, not only to fight against that, we do that, but we do that because we have a love, right? Like, we do that because we want to love freely, love openly, love together, and because love will really ultimately lift up our society. I was actually like a little embarrassed that some of the spiritual things I mixed in with my Bible, but then I was like, spirit is actually very important to all of us. No, I know. But spirit is very important to all of us because our people have always been very spiritual. It's essential. And I think that part of that is this movement towards love, right? Audre Lorde writes around love as an important part of the movement. Octavia Butler writes around love as an important part of the movement. Like, anyone we read are pulling towards that because love is really what has held our communities together, and love pulling that. So I know that ends. I want to end it at that, but I did want to say that that's the reason why we strive for liberation. That's the reason why we care about the environment. Why is it that climate change matters? Because we love this planet. We should. The planet is not something that serves us, but it's something that we respect, that we're in relationship with. And so the more that we do it in those frames, I think starts to get us to really think of that as an important why. So I want to leave it there because I know that there are probably thoughts and questions that we want to open it for y'all.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll come up and
We see a hand there.
Yay.
Thank you. Put that hand up.
Hi, how are you? Kevin Beatty, I'm a psychology major here at LaGuardia. I just want to thank you all for sharing your thoughts with us. It's very, very moving and inspirational. I just had a question for the three panelists. So at what point in your lives did you feel that you felt that calling to community organizing? And if there was sort of like a central point where you knew that that's where you needed to focus on to lead your lives on forward?
Well, I already started. I became involved in the student movement of the 1969, 1970, and almost you weren't born. It's all right. And I never became uninvolved. And that was I was involved on the CUNY student movement that changed CUNY and required them to have Black and Latino studies, We created open admissions. I mean, we got a lot of stuff done here. Yeah, well, yeah, it's real. It really did happen. You know, I was, 8 months pregnant, standing in front of a building, blocking entrance to the administrators. Oh no, I was at
They did that here in LaGuardia.
Yeah, it was so.
I know they did that in LaGuardia too. I know, we got solidarity. And yeah, we marched on Columbia too because they needed help. I mean, the police were really going after those students at Columbia. And understand this is the time of the Vietnam War, and we were fighting, but we were fighting first for our families, our culture, and for the students we knew that were on the outside of CUNY that could not even get into CUNY. Were not allowed in. Hunter had 90 Black students and 58 Latino students out of 6,000. You don't know what CUNY used to be like. You don't know what CUNY used to be like. It was an elitist school for kids who didn't want to send their kids off, pay for education. It was free. Completely free.
That's right. And when the Black people
Came in, that's right.
started
That's when
charging.
they started charging. Exactly.
Yeah.
I was gone by then. But the departments that we started are still in existence. I had to say it. Some of the student activism that needs to be in those departments are not there anymore. But that's how I got started. I'm going to let other people talk.
So I'm the generation that comes after. And I think my first early experience, I was little, very shy. I didn't start talking till I was 19. My husband says I'm still making up for it. But I was in Washington Heights, and my Black queer uncle, who took care of me, taught me how to walk, how to put on makeup, all that stuff. Some kids started throwing rocks at him and spitting at him and calling him a spig and the F word. And I remember putting my little body across from him. Mm-hmm. And I think it was this moment, it was at that moment, his name was Roberto Garcia, Kibae. And it was at that moment that I thought, when I grow up, I'm never going to let this happen to people. I'm going to study, and I'm never going to let this happen to people. And, I didn't become an activist early on because I didn't speak, right? But in my early 20s, I became a staff attorney at CSS,
Community Service
Society. I don't remember, I'm older now. And I met Richie Perez, and I meet these young lords who are my elders who I looked up to. And so I start listening to the stories. And then we start thinking about our generation is a little different from that generation because we think of direct action and organizing as a strategy, as a multi-pronged strategy, while we're passing legislation, while we're building leadership, while we're engaging popular education, while we're handling comms, like we literally do all the things, right? But it was really sort of my foundation of how these people who organized it made it possible for me to then take it to another place. But it really kind of started with that moment when I was little. My mom, I remember, used to say, maybe you should be a doctor. And I'd say, oh, then I'll become a doctor and people will give me chickens and I will, I'll take care of them when they give me chickens. Like, where'd you come out with this? But I still remember, I used to walk in front of the TV going like this, saying, Patria muerte venceremos. And my house, we're talking about parents that were young in the 70s. It was Black was beautiful. The house was full of Black people from all over the world, from Brazil, from Honduras, from Cuba, from all over. I grew up really knowing that those were my ancestors and that those were my people. And so there was I was being politicized from a very early age. But I think it was that moment where somebody so kind, so loving, could be treated so cruelly. And his life is really, if I were to talk about it, he died from complications from AIDS, and he went through a lot. And I just felt like I'll never let that happen to people. So I think it started young.
Thank you. for me was so I grew up in Colombia. I'm from Colombia. We migrated here when I was 9 years old. Between 9 and 10, my father was a pastor. He was a lawyer and also a pastor, and he was offered to pastor a South American church here. But even in Colombia, you're black wherever you go, right? Your whiteness can change sometimes, but you're black everywhere. And my father was treated always differently in Colombia, and then therefore we were treated differently in Colombia. And I started to notice that, and I started to be like aware of like, okay, because my father, he was a very intelligent man, was not necessarily connected to the Black Colombian movement, like he just wasn't. And so but then I wanted to learn more about Black Colombians and the Colombian Revolution and all this stuff. So when I started to learn about that, I then wrote about it. My lived experience here then in the U.S. reminded me of Blackness pretty often. I mean, in Colombia did too, but so did here. And I started to understand, okay, this is my place, this is my thing. And then, and so I wrote my history thesis in undergrad was on Black Colombians and the Colombian Revolution at the City College of New York. That's why I asked if you were at City College. And that really is what kind of started me there. I would say there was something before, because even when I was 12, I bought some books. Like I remember Blacks in Science by Evan van Sertima and all these other books that I was randomly buying as a kid. That people were buying, like, Where's Waldo? I'm like,
you're
Blacks in Science. And so I just started to have a different learning. And then I met people, and I met many people. And one of the people that I was mentioned is Mina Jimenez Romano, who was my mentor in many areas and who founded the Afro Latino Forum. And she's a socialist thinker, and she was like, think about this, think about that. Black Puerto Rican Marta and me grew up in the same neighborhood essentially, right? East Harlem. And so then I learned from there, started to just learn a lot more from different areas. So for me, it started, I would say, very young, right? But then I started to be critical, right? I started to be critical in other areas, including religion, including Christianity. Like making sure that, like, yeah, okay, I identify as Christian, but why are we doing things like that? And real quickly, I remember that I was asking a lot of questions in places, and my father said, ask all the questions you ever want. Don't ever let anyone tell you. Because I was being told not to ask questions. They were like, don't ever let anyone tell you not to ask questions. So that's really what got me started.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
One question.
I think our broadcast, do we have a hard stop for that? No?
We do not.
We do not.
Continue.
Okay, let's go.
Yay.
For questions?
Any questions? Just like here. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Hello, I am not a student. However, for the past about 12 years of my life, I've dedicated most of my work to bridging the gap in between social media presence and education. And how do you create educational entertainment on social media? Some people may recognize me from a platform that I used to curate called the Afro-Light Diaspora. And my question is basically about community and safety. So I had to take a step back and actually deactivate a platform that had over 120,000 followers because I was getting death threats from Dominican nationalists because I was actively defending Haitians in the Dominican Republic and actively educating, as a millennial, Generation Z was more likely to listen to someone like me. And I was at the feet of, someone like Dr. Vega begging for information and going to the Caribbean Cultural Center, then turning what I would learn from someone like her into content for Generation Z to consume. And I literally got pictures of parents sending me pictures of their guns because their children were learning from me on Instagram that Dominicans are Black and that we celebrate, the wrong Independence Day, DR, and things like that, right? I was talking about Kwame. I was teaching Dominicans about famine. I was teaching Dominicans about, nobody knows about Carlos Cooks. We all talk about Garvey, but we never talk about the Dominican that, revolutionized Harlem, basically. And so, to my point, to land the plane, how do we create infrastructures for safety so that people like myself can continue to do this kind of work? Because I believe that that's my purpose, is to consistently sit at the feet of women like Dr. Vega so that I can somehow make that information more palatable for the generation that's looking up to me, without getting burnt out and without feeling like my life is in danger.
Serious. This is.
So the issue of safety is one that we've been talking a lot about. I've had death threats. I've had someone after September 11th take the nuts and bolts off the gate so that the gate would fall on me. I've had people jump up from an audience to try to attack me. I get overwhelmed by the number of conservatives and right-wing people who come after me on social media. But I've made a decision that I have to do it anyway. But what we do to protect ourselves, and one of the threats that we're having as part of the climate justice movement, is that the right wing has put out, I think, something like 82 pieces of legislation to take away the 501c3 status of the Climate Justice Alliance, and is coming after all of us. So all of us have hired people to build our internal capacity to withstand the assaults. We've got law firms. We're engaged in cybersecurity and how to protect us that way, because the Climate Justice Alliance, which we founded, I don't know if you remember the People's Climate March, but we were one of the organizers of a march of 400,000 people. There we learned about how to do security for direct actions and different kinds of organizing. And so we know how to do that. But in terms of our data, in terms of our institutions that anchor the work that we do, they're coming for all of them. And we have been, when I said we're building the good and moving the money, we have been building the good and moving the money all across the country. So for example, in the Southeast, where you've got all these Black-led organizations that have always been underfunded, we're growing them at a level that is threatening everyone, these folks. So we're sharing that information, and I have tons of meetings every week, every single week. I am in meetings with movement leaders from across the country on how we are building the capacity to protect our institutions and how to protect our the way that we've been set up. And then just personally, at our organization, if you come, you're always going to see these guys standing there looking like they think about it, right? And so we literally, even when we were putting down trees in the neighborhood, and you think trees is such an environmental thing, but trees really affect mental health. They affect our ability to breathe better. And so we had meetings with Latin kings and nietas and said, hey, we need you to take care of the trees. And they're like, that's what's up, we're going to take care of the trees, right? So they took care of the trees. And so there's all kinds of levels of security, and we need to think about it. At the end, you need to think about how far you can go. And I think your question is the right one. How do we collectively care for each other? Because it really is about collective care and looking out. Yeah. And making sure. No, I know we're all in the same situation, but there is something that you do that isn't being done by other people, which targets you, right? And so we believe that we have to be leaderful, and that we have to train other people so that if they come for one of us, they really can't take us out because there's so many of us, right? So there's a lot of different things, but in this moment with the rise of fascism, it's the right conversation to be having. And then with our people and how they respond to the issue of race, we're going to have some messy conversations, right? So in our community, it's the immigrants talking about, we come to this country to work, not to live on welfare. Well, who is that message for? Are they trying to send a message to Black people and Puerto Ricans? Because we don't work, you got rights because we did what we did for you to have those rights. But nobody challenges them because it's politically incorrect to do that. So what we do, because we're trying to build alliances, and we understand that nationality is the creation of colonialism, and that we're basically the same people, right? With different accents and different ways, Pongo, right? But still, we're having the messy conversation about, we're all here to work, we're all doing the work, and we got your back, But when you say that, it triggers us, and it creates, with the Asian community in Sunset Park will talk about how they're not safe, and they lean into stereotypes that are not in their interest, right? And we'll talk about their socioeconomic profile in Sunset Park, and how they have high levels of asthma and cancer, and how they have an underground economy, how there's human trafficking, how there's domestic abuse. And then we're like, so what are you talking about when it comes to violence? So we break it down, and we have these messy conversations. And in the process of that, we're building consensus, we're building alignment, we're building community. And it comes from everything that the brother said, which is love. And then people find out, oh, we need to keep each other safe. Because that's what we're going to do, right? With an extreme weather event, they did these mutual aid groups. And I had a meeting with them last week saying, what if the supply chain was disrupted?
Thank you.
What do we do then? I said, so we've mapped all your backyards and we've mapped all the alleys so that we can figure out where we're going to grow the food and engage in a barter system so that if the food system is disrupted, we will grow food, and that's how we will take care of each other. So there's a lot of different ways, sister, and I know it's scary. This is scary times, and this is demanding us to be courageous. That's what we have to do. I'm disabled. I have limited mobility. And I'm always afraid that people are going to come after me and that I can't kick their ass the way I could have. 20 years ago, I got the cane. I literally walk around with it. And this look like, y lo piense, right? But it is a real question, and there are real interventions and things that can be done to protect you on that space, because you have to be in that space. And we can provide people who can answer those questions better than I just did.
I want to answer them. And I don't know about everyone on the panel, but I've had my share of deadlifts. At one point, I was actually collecting the written ones so I could show my grandkids, this is what it's like. And that's when I was just doing civil rights law on me, death threats, people would do it again. It's different then because it was a collective doing work. I think that's the real. Thank you for coming. And good luck with your papers. Lots of digest. The good news is that I don't see most young people doing things individually. They make it a collective because the collective provides cover. If it's just not, Anita's podcast, if it's the group's podcast, they're gonna have to hit all of you. They're gonna have to hit all of you. They can't just hit one and say they've gotten rid of it. And so collective leadership and collective fronts, so that they know that there's more coming, even if they take you out or whatever. And I'm not saying that you're going to be taken out. You're not going to be taken out. But the idea that they're, and understand that most, but not all, are just words. But don't think that in this nation that the people will not resort to violence, because they will. And the only response to that is planning your response, have a planned response, and have collective action and collective cover. As soon as one person steps out and says, this is the Juanita whatever show, that's it. They know who to hit. Very, very important. And that just blends right into what we've been saying. Is that none of this stuff is, that doesn't mean you can't have something in your name, but none of this real action is individual. Remember, they're not trying to silence you, they're trying to silence your message. Your message. So if the message continues, they're going to have to come up with another strategy. But don't think that this country is not going to move to violence. It will. Not that I can tell them stop.
So I think we've come to the end of this panel. I want to thank Elizabeth Jean-Pierre, I want to thank Josue Ferrer, and Edmund Alba-Simmons. And I want to give the opportunity for Dr. Marta Morena Vega to close us out. She is a woman who her name has been brought up throughout this time, and we are all very close to her. She's a pioneer
She's a fierce, fierce, fierce human being. I'm going to read her bio super short and then let her talk, but she's dedicated her life to international advocacy and the creation of institutions that promote social justice, particularly among Latino populations and the African diaspora. She's the founder of the Caribbean Cultural Center African Diaspora Institute, the co-founder of the Association of Hispanic Arts, the Network of Centers of Color, the Roundtable of Institutions of Color, the Corredor Afro in Puerto Rico, and she's the founder and president of the Creative Justice Initiative, and she is my other mother, and I am so pleased and so honored to give the mic.
All that I can say is thank you for being here, and to Ryan for hosting us and thanking us and reaching out to us, right? And I think that the word, in addition to love, is passion. Right? We do what we do because we love it. There's no other word for it. You know, people can put it on in a bio or can say we did this or did that. Ultimately, we do it because we believe it and we're passionate. Right? And all of us have gotten threats. That doesn't make it good, right? But it may, you know, somehow in my head I say, we're doing a good thing. Because when people come at you, it's because they react to it, right? And what you're saying. What I would say is make sure you're in community. So that if your honey's not there or your partner's not there, we will have to be there. So we have to know that you're going to that. Because you're part of family. And we're your family. Yeah? So thank you.